As the silence stretched, Troy took a deep breath, steeling himself for the argument he knew was coming. He opened his mouth, choosing his words carefully. "Ron, I didn't mean," he began, but was cut off by an indignant Ron. "Didn't mean? Didn't mean." Ron's voice rose, his anger spilling out into the restaurant. "You didn't mean to betray our friendship, or you didn't mean to get caught." "I didn't think." Troy tried again. "That's right. You didn't think." Ron seethed, his voice thundering through the previously lively restaurant. The bustle of the place seemed to quiet, the other patrons eyeing the escalating argument with veiled curiosity and discomfort. Troy swallowed hard, pushing down his guilt. "Ron, I didn't befriend her to spite you. I did it too." He hesitated, unable to explain his motivations in a way that wouldn't inflame the situation further. But Ron wasn't in the mood to listen, his sense of betrayal blinding him to anything else. "You've crossed a line, Troy," he warned, pointing a finger at him. "This isn't over." The argument came to a heated end, leaving a palpable tension hanging in the air. The restaurant, once filled with the friendly chatter of the afterwork crowd, fell into an uneasy quiet, the patrons giving the table a wide berth. The confrontation had shifted the atmosphere entirely, leaving a sour taste in the mouth of their camaraderie. The argument concluded, but the tension remained, a grim specter hovering over their table. Troy looked down at his uneaten food, appetite lost in the midst of their heated exchange, while Ron, red-faced and fuming, was visibly shaking with barely suppressed rage. Around them, the restaurant had quietened, the other patrons casting surreptitious glances their way, their curiosity tinged with unease. Ron stood abruptly, his chair scraping harshly against the floor. "I can't do this right now," he declared, voice thick with unshed anger and betrayal. He threw down some bills for his meal, not bothering to count them. Troy watched as Ron stalked out of the restaurant, the door slamming shut behind him. The remaining silence was deafening. Troy could feel eyes on him, the weight of their scrutiny heavy. He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose, the reality of their situation sinking in. Things had taken a turn, their friendship on the verge of breaking, and he wasn't sure how or even if they could mend it. Troy sat alone, his food long forgotten, stewing in the aftermath of Ron's confrontation. As he looked around the restaurant, still feeling the weight of judgmental stares, he felt a surge of indignation. This wasn't his fault. He hadn't started this, Ron had. And yet, here he was, bearing the brunt of the man's jealousy. Finally, he rose from the table, throwing down some money for his untouched meal, and walked out into the cooling evening. Ron was still outside, pacing angrily and cursing under his breath. Troy felt a jolt of sympathy, but quickly squashed it. This was a confrontation of Ron's making. He had no obligation to back down. He walked straight up to Ron. "I didn't start this," he began, voice steady despite the emotional turmoil churning within him. "You did, and you've got no right to throw accusations at me when you're the one messing around behind your wife's back." Ron reeled as if slapped, his eyes widening in surprise and then narrowing in anger. "You're just a kid, Troy," he spat. But Troy wasn't deterred. "And you're just an old man, Ron," Troy retorted, "trying to relive your glory days by chasing after some woman online. You think dyeing your hair and getting a new haircut makes you younger. It just makes you look desperate." Ron's face turned a deep shade of red, but Troy pressed on. "You're a joke at the factory, Ron. Everyone laughs behind your back. You're a has. Been desperately trying to hold on to a youth that has long since slipped away." As his words hit home, Ron's features tightened, his gaze turning icy. He'd struck a nerve. Troy could see that, but he felt no remorse. It was about time someone put Ron in his place, showed him the harsh reality of his actions. And if he was the one to do it, then so be it. Ron stood there, teeth clenched and face flushed, as Troy's words echoed in his head. They were hurtful, humiliating, and worst of all, true. He was just an old man chasing his lost youth. The reality of this revelation left him feeling naked and exposed. A raw wound for everyone to see. "What did you just say?" Ron's voice came out as a growl, low and dangerous. "You think you can disrespect me like that? Me, who has worked his entire life, put sweat and blood into everything, while you've barely seen anything beyond your mom's basement." Troy's defiant gaze didn't waver. He was unmoved by Ron's anger, almost expectant. This only served to fuel the fury bubbling within Ron. A fight. A physical fight. It was an absurd idea, but it was the only thing that made sense in his fog of anger and wounded pride. "Fight me," Ron challenged, jabbing a finger into Troy's chest. "If you're man enough to confront me with your big words, be man enough to back them up." Troy took a step back, eyebrows raised in surprise and a trace of apprehension in his eyes. The reality of Ron's challenge seemed to take a moment to sink in. "What?" Troy stuttered. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," Ron spat out, the streetlight catching the fiery determination in his eyes. "Let's see who's the joke." The stage was set. The challenge was laid out. All that was left was for Troy to accept. And as Ron stared down at him, waiting for a response, he couldn't help but feel a perverse thrill in the anticipation. His life might be spiraling out of control, but this was something he could grasp, something he could fight against. And fight. He would. Troy blinked, taken aback by the fiery challenge thrown at his feet. Ron, the old man he had worked with for years, was challenging him to a fight. It was surreal, absurd even. But the serious look in Ron's eyes left no room for doubt. He was not joking. "Ron," Troy began, struggling to maintain a level-headed demeanor, "you've got to be kidding me." "Does it look like I'm kidding?" Ron responded, his gruff voice echoed in the silent night. For a moment, Troy could see the desperation in Ron's eyes. This wasn't about him. It was about Ron trying to hold on to something slipping away. It was a raw, ugly spectacle of a man at the end of his rope. Troy felt a sudden pang of empathy for the older man. But that didn't mean he would indulge this madness. "Look, Ron," Troy started again, steadying his voice. "I'm not going to fight you. This isn't high school. We're not kids anymore." He paused, looking Ron straight in the eyes. "You're old enough to be my dad, for God's sake. I'm not going to punch you over some online drama." Ron's face twitched at the word old, but he said nothing. The tense silence stretched between them, only broken by the distant hum of the city. "Ron, we need to handle this like adults," Troy added, "not by throwing punches." But as Troy looked at the hardened expression on Ron's face, he wasn't sure his words were reaching him. The situation was escalating beyond anything he could have anticipated, and he wasn't sure how to put the brakes on it. For the first time in their argument, Troy felt a cold trickle of dread. This was not going to end well.